In the astrological sciences, we have these axes that are running through the horoscope, which means these axes that are running through the celestial globe that surrounds us, the space that surrounds us. And these axes are created by 2 points that are always directly opposite each other. Okay? So they're all moving like this. So we got the hands of the clock that move like this, right? But axes, they're always moving around together. Okay? And the axes in astrology are really, when it comes down to it, the most important points that we're looking at in the chart. Okay? They are what life is all about. And if we all look at these things, we look at the different axes in the chart every time we read a chart, pretty much. However, it's important to always look at them together and realizing that any shift in one is a shift in the other. Okay? That they don't work independently ever. Okay? And if we use them together and we observe what's happening to them together, we start putting together a bigger part of the picture. Okay? When we only look at like one of the points that has a axial point on the other end of the chart, on the other side of the chart, we'll get some information from that. Okay? But it's not going to show us the whole picture. We need to look at the opposite point as well. Okay? So this course I'm going to teach right now is going to be a relatively short course that I'm teaching for the Cards website, for the Cards students, for the Cards of Truth system. And all these principles apply fully to astrology, to Vedic astrology or Western astrology, any astrology you want to do that uses these different axes that are in the chart. Okay? At a later point, I'll probably teach it specifically from an astrology point of view. Right now, I'm focusing on some cards classes, so I'm going to focus from a cards point of view. Okay? So when we're looking at these axial points, and we see one that's in a club and one that's in a heart, let's say, 2 opposite points, one's in a club, one's in a heart that year or in that birth, then we know that when this club gets, shifted, it's going to have an impact on the hearts in their life. Okay? That they're going to be working off each other. When the hearts get shifted, the clubs are going to shift. Okay? So if you've got, we'll talk about the examples later. Okay, after I get this down, I don't want to jump ahead of myself. So the point I'm making is, if you just look at one of the points exclusively, you'll go, oh, this sun, which is you, is in a heart. You're going to be all heartsy this year. Okay? That's going to be true. That's going to be part of the picture. Okay? The other part of the picture is, the other point of the axis, the Earth's shadow, is in a club this year. You're going to be dealing with business and really busy and being productive. And that's the other part of the picture. So involving themselves in hearts is going to lead to all this productive activity of the clubs. And if we didn't include that, it is literally a because of. It's because of the hearts the activities get stirred up. Okay? In that example. It's not, I'm doing activity and I'm over here doing my hearts. No, it's because of one, the other one shifts. Somehow creates a shift. And it wouldn't have happened without those hearts. Okay? So, when we add this, you can easily see we're looking at the whole picture here of what's really happening. Because at the end of the day, we're going down the road of life. We're going from point A to point B. We're traveling. And all the axes that we have in the chart are the roads, the paths that we are traveling on. Okay? And so it really helps with the interpretation to look at both points together always. Okay? Now we regularly do this with the most famous axis in the chart, which is the Rahu Ketu axis, the north node, south node axis. Okay? But we want to do it for all the axes, just like we do it for Rahu and Ketu. We really want to do it all the time. Okay? So, I'm going to introduce in this video the four axes that we're going to work with. People who aren't doing the cards will want to focus on this. You can learn a lot from this. You can contemplate and come up with a lot of great conclusions for yourself. Like I said, down the road, I'm going to do an astrology version of this. Right now I'm doing the cards version. Okay? But in this course, in this first video, it's going to be, it doesn't matter if you want to use it for astrology or cards, it's going to be the same information. So enjoy even if you're an astrologer and not a card reader. Okay. So the first axis we have is that of the sun and the earth's shadow. Okay? Now I just finished the middle mini course on the earth's shadow, just 5 videos at cardsoftruth.com. And so a lot of you all know what that is now. Okay? For those who don't, the earth's shadow is the point opposite the sun. So we have the sun here as a big light. We have the earth here. We have the zodiac. We have the planets on the zodiac. The sun is bouncing his light everywhere, more than 360 degrees in a global shape of light emanating from the sun. Some of that light hits this planet, and when it hits those planets, that light gets reflected to the earth. And so the energy of the other planets is essentially reflected sunlight. Okay? Now there's one place where the sun doesn't shine. Okay, that's kind of a funny joke. There's another place, a second place where the sun doesn't shine. And from an astrology point of view, there's one place the sun doesn't shine, and that is the earth's shadow. Because we have the sun here, shining all over, we have the earth here, and when the sun's light hits the earth, there's this very small little bit of light where there's space where there's no light, because it's the shadow of the earth. Okay? And it's just a beam of light, the size of the shape, beam of darkness, size of the shape of the sun that is not getting eliminated by the sun because the earth's in the way. And exactly opposite the sun is a part of the zodiac where that shadow is hitting. And that's the earth's shadow. It's not an imaginary point. It does exist. There's less sunlight on that point than any other point of the sky, of the ecliptic. Okay? It's the earth's shadow of the earth. It's where there's the least amount of sunlight. So this is the first axis we're going to look at. Okay? I looked at just the earth's shadow in the previous little course. We're going to get into it more as a pair. So the polarity, the pair of these two, we have the sun, which is the self. Okay? We are something. Because we are something, we're going to do something, right? Every animal is based on its definition of what it is, it does something. Rodents, by definition, chew on things. Okay? By definition. If it's a rodent, you know it's going to chew on things, okay? Deer, by definition, eat green things that are all over the earth. Okay? They eat plants. By definition, that's what they're going to do. All right? So, based on what something is, it is the foundation of what it's going to do at the majority of its life. Okay? A deer will sometimes eat something that's not a green leaf or green grass, but the majority of the time that's what he's eating. Okay? Same with us humans. We are something. That's our sun. We have the essence of our soul is, and in its current development and expression on earth, is creating us as something. And out of that something comes our actions. Okay? Now the sun is Atma, which is self, and actions is karma. Okay? So we have the self, and it's going to do karma. It's going to do actions. Karma simply means action, to do. It comes from the root kri, which is to do, to work, to act. And karma means action. Now we talk about it as something that's coming towards us. That's the fruits of your karmas. That's the fruits of your action. But karma is simply action. Okay? And it has nothing to do with the momentary fruits right now. It has to do with the fruits of the future. Now, of course, that future can be a split second later, but usually It's a little further away than that, right? Possibly lifetimes away. So understand that we have the self, the Atma, and based on what the self is, it's going to do actions. So by seeing what the self is, we can determine the actions. And they're going to somehow have a relationship with each other. So if in the cards you have the sun in a heart, then you're a heartsy person. But if the earth shadow's in the club, because you're a heartsy person, you're going to be busy. Being a heartsy person is where your busyness comes out of. Okay? For a person who's got the earth shadow in the clubs, but they've got the sun in a spade, them being busy comes out of spades. Okay? We'll talk about that more later. Okay? But you get the idea. So the sun is the self, the sun is the Atma, the earth shadow is the karma or the action. Now why does the earth shadow represent the karma, the actions that we do? Because the actions are always a pale shadow of the reality. Okay? Think of your mother, whether you had a good mother or a bad mother. As your mother, she has a love for you and a care for you. Okay? Yet, many people feel like their mother never loved them or cared for them. And some people said, yeah, they did a pretty good job, but... Right? Because the actions that they're actually able to do are a pale shadow of what they really are, which is your mother. Okay? Because in this world, actions are always imperfect. It's just one of the rules. Okay? It's impossible to have perfect actions. Varaha Mihira says that a Brahman's feet are pure. It's the only pure thing on a Brahmin is his feet. And you're like, why? Well, feet are what we stand on. It's our understanding. The Brahmin, the saint, the priest, the saintly priest, the enlightened priest, which is the true word meaning of the word Brahmin, he is not faultless in actions. He is not perfect in what he does. He only has perfect understanding. So Lord Rama shot a guy in the back with an arrow while he was dueling. He puts an arrow in his back. Totally sinful for a Kshatriya to do that kind of deed. Yet he had the understanding of why that event had to take place. Of why this guy had to be shot in the back. Okay? And so that understanding keeps him pure. It purifies him of that, what could otherwise be a sinful deed. Okay? So, actions are never pure. There's a time where Jesus gets mad at a poor little fig tree and curses it to never give fruit. And you think, gosh, what about all the other hungry people who have come through here for the next 50 years, hoping they're going to find something to eat, and they don't get that fig tree, it's dead. And maybe they starve because Jesus got mad at the fig tree, right? And, every saint, every guru always has something they did that was wrong. Okay? Jesus cursing a fig tree, not that big of a deal. Okay? Lord Rama shooting someone in the back with an arrow, pretty big deal. Okay? But there's always something they do, because it's impossible to possess a human body and not have to be involved in an action that is not correct, according to, the scriptures, okay? And that's just how it is. So the self is what it is. But the actions are never pure. For Lord Rama was the Kshatriya Lord, the noble warrior, yet he did an unrighteous action. Okay? One, okay? And so this is how it is. So recognize that there's a mirror between these two things. There's a relationship from self and what you do. But what you do is never going to reveal the true, full essence of who you are. Someone can be a healer. Are they going to magically heal everyone? Is everyone just going to get healed who come to them? No, they're not going to be the perfect healer. Even if everything about them is, I just care about healing, I just care about healing, they're not going to heal everybody. Okay? George Vitholka is one of the best healers of, the modern era. 90% of the time he could heal people, but he couldn't heal everybody. Okay? And this is a guy who dedicated himself to healing like few people. Okay? So, understand that. Okay? And you need to look at both. What are they really, and what are they not? So look at your mother. How much of a mother was she really? How really were her actions? Sometimes you're going to see that your mother's actions were better than she was a mother. She wasn't even a mother. But she actually did better actions than a lot of other people. Okay? And you'll see this. I know people that all they want to do is mother. They want to mother this animal, and this dog, and this puppy, and they want to mother kids. Yet, whenever they try, they do such a bad job of it. But they are mothering people, So what you are and your actions, they work together. They work off each other. They play off each other. They give strength for each other. They reduce from each other. They're always working together. Okay? If there's, some negative weight on one end, you get negativity on the other end. Okay? And also you can add details. Oh, what card is the sun in? What card is the earth shadow in? How are they working together? How is the sun and the earth shadow working together to determine the events of the year? The things they're doing for work, the things that they're focused on that year, and so on. Okay? All right, then we have Rahu and Ketu. Another really important thing about the sun-earth shadow axis is it particularly gets triggered during new and full moons. Okay? Especially full moons. Because when there's a full moon, the earth shadow has the moon on it. Okay? So the light of the moon is actually illuminating the earth shadow for a little bit of time once a month. Okay? Then the new moon, of course, when the moon conjuncts the sun, that's when the moon, there's no moonlight on the earth shadow at all. Okay? See, the moon is the second biggest light. So imagine, we got the sun here. We got the earth here. We got the earth shadow over here. The sun is illuminating everything except that little earth shadow. The planets are up here in the sky, including the moon, and the sun's hitting them with their light, and they're bouncing light back to Earth. They're also bouncing light over to the Earth's shadow. The planet that's doing the most of that is the moon. Except on new moon. On new moon, there's no moon to be seen. Okay? So there's no moonlight hitting anything. The minute the moon starts being seen, at that moment, it's shining more light on the Earth, more light on the Earth's shadow, than all the other planets combined. Okay? So the majority of the light that the Earth's shadow gets is from the moon. At new moon, Earth shadow's no light. At full moon, Earth shadow's full of light. And in between, the Earth shadow gets a different amount of light. Okay? So the relationship between the development of the sun and the Earth's shadow is dependent largely upon the travel of the moon, from new moon to full moon to new moon to full moon. Okay? And in Vedic astrology, we divide that cycle of new moon to full moon into 15 what we call tithis, which are lunar days. And the cycle from full moon to new moon, we cut into 15 more pieces called tithis as well. So we have 30 tithis a month, 15 from new moon to full moon, and 15 from full moon to new moon, okay? And depending on what tithi you're born in, that has an impact in your life because it's determining how much light the moon's getting and also how much light the Earth's shadow is giving. So it impacts not just your moon, it's impacting your Earth's shadow as well, okay? the main reason I want to do a class on astrology with this, because in that course I can add the tithis and which are the phases of the moon, basically. Okay. In the Cards of Truth system, we don't have the tithis are like a little more astrology centered, so I don't want to bring tithis into the Cards of Truth and make it harder than it has to be. But there is some extra information you can get from examining that. Okay. But keep in mind that when the new moons and full moons, especially full moons, those are Earth shadow times. The events going on around that time have to do with your Earth shadow. At new moon, the events going around at that time have to do with you. Okay? The self. Okay. The other major axis, the axis everyone looks at together because they're obviously in axis, is Rahu and Ketu, the north and south nodes of the moon. These represent your ancestral environment. Okay? Now, why am I using those terms together? Because you were born, and you are living in your ancestral environment. Why is the world the way it is today? Because of me? Hardly. Because of my ancestors? Hell yeah. The environment of the world that we're left to live in is the direct result of the lives of our ancestors, of the people who came before us, right? And Rahu and Ketu, of course, are your ancestors. They're your ancestral lineage. So, we have this axis of our ancestral environment, okay? That's trying to find a development of health. Just like your axis of self and karma, the Sun, Earth's axis, are trying to find a balance, a development in self of the actions revealing more of the self, becoming a healer with greater actions, a mother with greater actions, whatever. That's the development of that axis. Then for Rahu and Ketu, we have the development of the ancestral karmas of one side of grandparents with the ancestral of the other. So you have two ancestral patterns, right? You've got your mother's side and the father's side. Okay? And it's not so simple that Ketu's is the mother's side and Rahu's the father's side. It's not that simple. But between those both, it represents your maternal and paternal ancestors. Starting with your grandfather, grandmothers, and going all the way back 7 generations. Okay? Now, what's happening with Rahu and Ketu, they're balanced. You know, there's always something going on inside of you. You developed because of the influences of your mother's parents and ancestors and your father's parents and ancestors. These two forces came together to make you. Okay? These two forces came together to create your environment of the world at large, and more importantly, your immediate environment that you were born into, where you were cared for, and how well you were cared for is completely dependent on those ancestral influences and how they developed your parents. Okay? So literally this environment that we are growing through, that we are developing under, and that we are developing in, is Rahu and Ketu. And it starts the moment we're conceived, because the moment we're conceived, we're surrounded by those ancestral influences in the form of our parents, and how those influences have molded your parents. Okay? And they're just like your parents are trying to have a better relationship, you know? Mom gets a little bit wiser, a little more insights. Okay, dad makes a couple breakthroughs. How do we know he did? Because otherwise he would have been gone, right? Because when people don't make breakthroughs together, eventually one disappears, right? Although it's remarkable how long people can be stuck together, right? But relationships are about making these breakthroughs in our ancestral programming, and people come together to do this in relationships. And so now we have these two ancestral paths working off each other, you know? When one gets better, the other one has to adjust and shift. When this one gets better, the other one. So your parents were doing that. You're doing it with your partners. That's impacting your kids, and it keeps on going. Okay? Talk more about this later. Okay. Eclipses are the times that the ancestral environment and the impact of the ancestral environment makes the biggest shifts in your life. Okay? So that means, when there's eclipses, the most important events of the world tend to happen. Okay? And those, of course, are based on the ancestral influences, what we were left with, right? The karmas of the mass humanity, of all the ancestors coming together to create the next big event that has to be dealt with, hopefully healthier. The same way that your two parents have an argument, they come together. First they come together in love and marriage, and they come together with argumentation at some point. And they're working out their ancestral influences. They're working out those two strains of being and developing out of that. Same with the world. Okay? So really just see how this environment that we're left with as a result of our ancestors' choices and lives has imprinted us from birth. And whenever there's eclipses, we're struggling with those imprints. Those are the times that we make changes or act or behave because of those imprints in the most significant ways in our life. Okay? So the thing about the environment is that the environment does imprint us. It goes into our core and determines who we are to a large degree. Just like an animal. Why did deer eat green things? Because they developed in an environment where there was green things. So they learned how to eat green things. Okay? So, same with us. Why are we responding, acting, behaving this way? Because we've been imprinted by this environment of Rahu and Ketu. So, the reality is, environment is a powerful factor. Yogananda used to say, environment is stronger than willpower. Okay? So he said if you want to become something, to do something, the first thing you do is you stay away from environments that don't support that. And you go to environments that do support it. Okay? Because in the end, the imprinting of the environment is going to have a huge impact on your being and who you are. You're trying to use your will and strength to become what you are, do the karmas you want to do. You want to be a better self and karma of the sun and earth axis. And then you've got this environment that's imprinting you. So you need to work towards getting the best environment to imprint you the way you want to be imprinted instead of being imprinted the way you don't want to be imprinted. Unfortunately, before we even had conscious choice of deciding what do I want to be and how do I want to act, we were imprinted with our ancestral environment. And this imprint happened at such a young age, it's very, very deep. And that's why examining Rahu and Ketu is so important. Okay? So on the cards, when we're looking at the Rahu Ketu axis, recognize that we're looking at an environmental, we're looking at environmental influences coming together to create change, to create a new product, to create something new. Just like your parents came together to create change, to create you. Out of everything they are, you were born from that. Are you like your parents? No, you're different. Are you unlike your parents? Can't quite say that, okay? We're like our parents a lot more than we ever want to admit, right? But we're not the same. There's change that comes from those environmental influences coming together. So it's Rahu and Ketu, they're all about change. They're how our world is changing around us. Because of things coming together that impact each other for the point of change. So is it hearts and spades? Is it hearts and clubs this year? What are the two forces that are coming together to create that change? Which of these forces is like the nice force with Venus and Mercury in that card? And which of these forces is the UGG fork with Saturn and Moon conjunction in that card? Okay? But those forces are working together, they're coming together, and they're going to create change within you, within your life in your birth spread, and within your year in your year spread. Okay? And the big times of this is the eclipses. Okay? Now, the next two axes are not quite as important. Okay? These are the heavy hitters that just impact us all the way down. The other ones are more, they're more superficial, but they're more important than that word makes them sound. They're more about the concrete. Just the simple realities of life. Okay? One of them is the first and seventh axis. The ascendant on one side, descendant on the other side, right? The self and the other. Yes, this is an axis. If I bite your head off, you're going to bite my head off. If I'm nice to you, chance of you being nice to me are better, right? Okay. That's the simple basics of it, but it's much, much more deep than that. The first house is you. The seventh house is I want that. You and want. The first house is the first house of dharma, of living out of who you really are. The seventh house is the first house of kama, desires. Okay? It's what I want. Okay? What you want is also equivalent to what you get. Right? The most interesting about life is that we so often want something and we're not getting it. Right? In fact, the biggest reason we have astrology, that people come to astrology, is because they want something they're not getting. I don't know the person who's getting 70% of what they want. Because they're too busy getting what they want to ever think they need to go to an astrologer, right? Okay? The person who gets the least of what they want, they're the ones that are making our phones ring off the hook. Okay? Obviously, duh, right? But here's the point I'm trying to make. There's the you are and you get. The first house is the you are. The seventh house is the you get. There's a polarity there. You get what you are. Okay? You really, really do. If you want to get something different, you have to be something different. First house. In a practical way. Not in a, this is who I really am, core kind of way of the sun. Not this is in how I'm imprinted by my ancestors, Rahu and Ketu. But simply, this is how I present myself. This is the concrete that people see. Okay? This is the concrete that people experience from me. You're going to get that back. But of course, in the world, it is like a mirror, but the world is a house of mirrors. And you know, when you go into the house of mirrors, they all make you look a little bit funny. Okay? But there's always a relationship between you and that mirror. Yeah, you can kind of tell that does look like me. And if I raise my hand, the mirror raised its hand. So yeah, that's actually me, even though it's sort of distorted. It's the same with the mirrors of our life. You are, you get. And you go, no, what I'm getting, I am not that at all. No, you're not that exactly. You're distorted, that's a distorted mirror of who you are. Okay? So this is polarity of our you are and you get. And what I found, one of the things I just noticed from years of doing readings was that when people came and they were unhappy and they were saying, I don't get this and I don't get this, it was always because of one reason. And this is a reason none of us want to acknowledge, you know? And that is, we're not getting that because we're not that. Because we're really not that thing. There's something about us that makes us not that. Maybe we're the opposite. But maybe we're just not the thing that even benefits from that. Okay? But we're not that. And we need to discover, am I not that because it's a character flaw? And I'm just screwing it up? I'm saying I want love, but I'm not a loving person. So I'm never going to have love because I get what I am and I'm not a loving person. So even though I want it, I'm not getting it. Okay, if that's the case, you work on yourself and you become a more loving person. When you're a more loving person, you'll get more love back. Okay? But what if it's not that? You know? What if you're a relatively loving person and you get a relative amount of love in your life and none of the love is right? Well, maybe because you're not the person who needs that love. And maybe the love that you are is not the love the world needs and the other people need. But still, what you are is what you get. You're getting a love that doesn't work, you're being a love that doesn't work. You know? Okay? And it might still be a loving type of person. But if it's not the loving person that is really you, it's not going to get you the love you really want. And because of all of our traumas and psychologies and the cultural programming of what things are and what things have value, we run around chasing these things that we're not, thinking that's what we need, when really we just need to understand we get what we are. What do I have? Okay. What parts of me does that really reflect? It reflects all your parts. And the parts of me that it does reflect, okay, is that a good reflection or a bad reflection of me? Bad reflection, work on myself. If it's a good reflection, but I'm still not happy with it, why am I not okay with that part of myself? Why do I think I need something different? When actually this thing is good because you have to accept some part of yourself and recognize who you really are, and then you realize, oh yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. I never wanted that other thing anyway. That was just an illusion of me thinking I wanted something that I'm not. Okay? So it gets really tricky. This first 7th house axis, it is a mind trip. Okay? Now, that's the idea. You are, you get. You get what you are. That's that axis. Okay? And of course, this happens particularly in our relationships and our partnerships. This is the big you get what you are axis, more than anything. Okay? This is also the axis of health, 1st house, and virility, 7th house. Okay? The way I heard this one best is that a friend of mine was saying that according to her dad, a person who doesn't want to have sex, it's because they're sick. That's his idea on it. His idea is, when he meets someone, they say, oh, I don't have sex, I don't want to have sex. He goes, what's wrong with you? What are you sick? What's your disease? You know? He instantly assumes if you don't want to have sex, it's because you're sick. Okay? And this is not a player. Her dad's a solid guy, devoted to the family, wonderful relationship. Great dad. With a nice chart. Okay? And this is his attitude about sex. If you're healthy, you want to have sex. If you don't want to have sex, you must be sick. He's playing with this axis. Health and virility. Health and virility. Now, there are pathologies where you're unhealthy, and out of that pathology, you're constantly thinking about sex. Your body constantly wants to experience sex, but it has no virility to really have sex. And if it has sex, it's exhausted. And if it tries to have sex, it usually does a bad job of it. Okay? So I'm not saying you don't want sex. I'm saying you don't. It's about virility. Okay? Sexual potency. These two play off each other too. So that's another simple one. Health and virility. Okay? Now, virility is not just applying to sex. Virility is the energy, the passion to pursue what you want, to pursue what matters to you. Okay? And if you say, I want to be the best version of myself I can, and I want liberation, liberation just became your 7th house. It's whatever the hell you want. Okay? And I just want liberation. Well, you're going to have the virility to sit down and meditate and churn out your mantras. Right? Or do whatever it is that you're doing. You need to have that focus. Ken Rao says the 7th house is the house of concentration when it comes to the spiritual life. What is concentration? It's when all your energy is focused on something. Now, do you want to make a guess where the average person has their greatest focus? Which activity are they more than 100, mostly close to 100% of concentration and focus? Sex. You know, Average person, most of the things they do, most of the time, there's some lack of attention. But wow, you get them in bed, they're focused. Okay? So virility is the ability to have your energy focused and flow towards what you want, whatever it is. Okay? Now, as biological creatures designed to procreate excessively, yeah, sex is the big analogy for that. But it's not limited to that. It's whatever it is you want, whatever you want and you have a passion for, that's going to focus your energy on that goal. That's really the 7th house. And that's going to be a reflection of your health. If you're not healthy, you're not going to have that energy, right? You know, when you meditate, you have to meditate with virility. You know, you can't sit there and go, oh, God, I hope I don't pass out. You know, you're not going to make a lot of progress like that, okay? So, these are two things. They're playing off each other. They're always in a perfect balance, okay? Now, this, just like, you know, unlike, okay, the Sun-Earth plane triggered by the new moon, full moons, the Rahu Ketu axis triggered by those eclipses, there's really not something that particularly triggers these axes. Okay, these axes are not the deepest part of the psyches. They're very basic in a way. They're very practical. Practically, if I'm not healthy, I don't have the virility to focus on what I want and do a good job with it and get anywhere with it. It's just like, that's just a practical thing. Is that going to change who I am? No. Is that going to make a breakthrough in my life? No. It's the Sun-Earth axis and the Rahu Ketu axis. That's where your breakthroughs are coming through. That's your soul and your actions, struggling in this world of karmas of our ancestors coming together to create an environment where we're forced to grow or die. Essentially, is what it is. Doesn't that happen? You know, these kids, they grow up in the world, like imagine World War II. Here they are fighting each other because of the ancestral results of World War I. It's like, okay, I'm going to clean up my grandfather's and father's mess. That's sort of what we're here for. And they were trying to clean up the messes of their grandparents and parents. Okay? We're all cleaning up each other's mess, you know? So, those are the deep, deep things. Okay, now the other axis is the 10th cusp and the 4th cusp axis. Okay, the MC is the 10th cusp. It's the highest point of the sky. It's the top of the sky. And the descendant, and the IC is the bottom of the sky. It's the point right below your feet. So one's below your feet, one's on top of your head when you're looking straight. Okay? It's also an important, concrete, practical axis like the 1st and 7th. Okay? The 10th house is your karmas. The 4th house is your foundations. Based on your karma, you're going to create a foundation in your life. The actions you do are going to create a foundation, right? If you work hard, 10th house, your 4th house, which is your bank account, is going to be great, right? Okay? If you work hard, your 4th house, which is your home, will be in a nicer neighborhood, won't it? Okay? So, it's your karma and your foundations. Okay? You do this and you create a foundation for yourself. These two are working together, these 2 points. Okay? Your foundation creates the action, the actions you're going to do as well. Okay, so these two work together, and they're always working together. Because of these foundations, I'm doing these actions. Because of these actions, I'm developing these foundations. Okay? Just like all the axes, they play off each other. Now, the 10th cusp is also karma towards you. Okay? And that results in the 4th cusp of how you're made to feel. Now, I'm using this word made to feel. Now, in psychology, we don't like to say anyone made you feel anything. Okay? But in this context, I'm going to use that word. How the karma of others, the actions of others, which is the 10th cusp, made you feel. 4th cusp. The reason I'm saying that, because the 10th house is a very important other. Okay? It's probably more important than your 7th house other. It's the other of your authorities. It's the other that you give power to. The person you give power to, that you give authority to, the minute you give it to them, their karmas are going to make you feel a certain way. So you want to make sure you give it to the right people, right? Okay. Now, is it their fault? No, it's your fault. You gave them the authority, right? So the minute you give them authority, realize that you have given them the power to determine how you feel. Okay? Sometimes you meet someone, I've heard a few people say this, someone will say something that doesn't even bother them. And you're like, oh, that didn't bother you? You're like, no, I don't respect them. So why should it bother me? You know, like, you'll get different people. Like, you get a writer, he writes a book, and a critic, you know, tears his book apart. And he doesn't care, you know. He doesn't hurt his feelings because he doesn't respect that critic as a critic. He doesn't respect that critic as knowledgeable in his field of literature or whatever. And so it's a joke to him. Okay? So recognize that it's this axis of authorities and how we're made to feel. How we feel, fourth cusp, determines the authorities we choose. If we feel bad, the first thing we're going to do is run out and find an authority to make us feel bad. You know, why do people run around and give their lives and devote themselves and give power to people who con them and ruin their lives and use them? Because they feel that bad about themselves. Okay? So we want to look at this too. What card is the fourth cusp in? What card is the 10th cusp in? How are these two cards working together to create your actions and foundations? Okay? And then there's a link here where I use that word karma for the 10th cusp and also the earth shadow. There's a relationship between the earth shadow and the 10th cusp. This is where it all comes together. Okay, this is where the self and the earth shadow, which is the self's actions, or the actions that spring out of the self that you are, connect to the practicalities life of the actions you're doing and the foundations that creates. Okay? And the foundations you have within yourself and how you feel determines the authorities you give your power to. And the authorities you've given your power to have an impact on how you feel. In a real world with it, you cannot escape as long as you make them an authority. That's why there's rebellions. People give the authority to King George, right? Back in the 1700s. And it's like, wow, because he's my king, my authority, I feel like shit. Every week I'm stressed out and strained and wondering how I'm going to feed my family because the taxes are so high. So I no longer recognize him as my authority because I want to feel better. And then they shoot at George. George lets them say, okay, you can be your own authority now. You decide on your next authority. And they chose George Washington, right? So, and the Constitution, that was the authority. And one day people will go, geez, this Constitution has mutated into something that I don't feel good anymore. I don't recognize that as an authority anymore. And then we'll have another revolution. And it always happens. It's never going to stop. Revolution is always going to happen. And that's simply when people say, I don't recognize that authority. We do that with our parents. We say, I don't recognize this authority. And then you do something that's against their will, and they get mad at you, and they don't talk to you for a year, or something, or you don't talk to them for a year. And one day, but it did matter, because you're upset and you're hurt inside, and you're holding grievances, but one day, you'll totally release them as an authority. Where everything they ever did, everything they might ever say to you now, just like water off a duck's back, like a stranger said it to someone you don't even know. It has that much meaning. So it takes a long time to divorce ourselves from the authorities of our lives. And of course, the main authorities in our lives are our parents. Of those two, generally the father is the stronger authority. Father's 10th house, mother's 4th house. And this is because women traditionally have given a lot of authority to the husband. Okay? And so, you know, the husband, which is your dad, ends up being the more authority person, right? But it's not always that way in every family. That holds true more often than not. Okay? So we have to divorce ourselves from authorities when we don't feel good. And we have to choose authorities that support our foundation of who we are, which is our fourth cup, and therefore make us feel good. Okay? Alright, so we've got these 4 axes, 8 points that we want to look at together. Okay? Always use the pair, derive more meanings, get a fuller interpretation. Okay? Now, with astrology, we do this with Rahu and Ketu all the time. We never look at Rahu and Ketu without looking at the other one. Now we need to get in the habit of doing that with all the other 3 points. And in the cards, we're going to do that a lot with Rahu and Ketu too, as well, to see the big changes, which is the Rahu Ketu that are happening in your life, in your lifetime, and also in your yearly spreads and whatever spreads you look at during that time period, because of these 2 forces coming together, demanding some resolution of change in your life, okay? And change in your environment, in the actual life that you're surrounded by, in the world you're surrounded by. And yeah, these are usually little changes every year, but they add up. And every year you're going to have an important eclipse, and when that important eclipse hits you, it's going to add up to a big bang of change and shift in your life. Okay? All right. I'll talk about each 4 of these more, and we're going to have examples to get this through our heads. But I hope this helps you appreciate the importance of looking at these axes and as a start. Okay, thank you.